They started down below the camera, and one of them came up, and it came behind a tree and was kind of doing this behind the tree.
And I found an alder that was snapped off right about this, and it looked like it had been purposely broken and pulled down.
I am actually excited to see who gets it. It's just a matter of time.
Before his time with the Olympic Project, Chris Spencer investigated an area near Mount St. Helens that he called X1. For a period of 4 years, Chris collected audio from the area and had several tense experiences. Although Chris no longer focuses on X1, the audio he has recorded over the duration of his Sasquatch research, as well as the accompanying analysis done by him and David Ellis, has allowed them to begin to focus in on patterns and categorize the sounds. One such category begins with a sound dubbed Mr. Grumpy Pants.
At the end of 2015, my friend Ryan, who was coming up here with me, he was at the time living behind Silver Lake on another friend's property, and he was staying in a fifth wheel. Well, I want to say it was around Thanksgiving. At the time, I was working out of town, and he had called me, and he was like, "Hey man, I'm hearing knocks." And I kind of blew it off. I was like, okay, whatever. He's like, "You got to come out and walk around, because there's stuff going on down here." And that's like, as the crow flies, that's about 13.5+ miles up over the Toutle Range from here. I mean, it takes you by car, it would take you an hour to get there. At that period of time, the elk moved down closer to the lake. You have a congregation of elk wintering down there. And of course, the snow level at that period of time it's snowing here. There's really nothing in here at this elevation at that time period. So everything's moving downhill. Everything's going to lower elevations. So I go out in December. We put a recorder out behind the house. And I was just kind of, doing it for my friend. To be honest, I didn't really think that something was happening. I thought he had Bigfoot on the brain, because I love Ryan, but he tended to have Bigfoot on the brain when we were in the woods. But we put the recorder out and we went back, and when I reviewed that recorder, it was like not even 10 minutes after we left the recorder out behind the property, something came up next to the recorder and pow, wood knocks. And so after I reviewed that, I told Ryan, I was like, well, there might be something to your story. So I started recording in a cedar swamp close to their house. And our other friend, the property owner, he had I want to say she was a 12-year-old daughter and then a 5-year-old son at the time, who were outside playing a lot. And this swamp across from their driveway, it was all these old growth cedars. You could sit back in there unseen and watch anything that's happening on the property. And I was like, that's a good place to put the recorder. I'll put the recorder there. And sure enough, January 1st, I went out there and it was almost dark. It was 5 p.m. I put the recorder out at 5 p.m. and it was snowing. It was snowing pretty hard. So no one was really outside doing anything. And of course, in the cedar area, where the swampy, marshy area, it's exactly what we talk about. It's going to be a warmer area. So the cedar trees created a canopy and cover, so there's no snow getting down to the ground in that area. Well, first there was a couple knocks, and then at 7:37 p.m. you get Mr. Grumpy Pants. when I first got it, I was like, what the heck is that? And I emailed it to David Ellis, and he goes, oh, you have a Mr. Grumpy Pants. Because David had a piece of audio where he called it Mr. Grumpy Pants. And so I guess technically mine is Mr. Grumpy Pants too.
What's interesting is that Chris came up with his Mr. Grumpy Pants on his own. Didn't have any idea that I had recorded something that I called Mr. Grumpy. So that tells you that there's a tonality in the voice structure that is, you know, get off my lawn, kind of a vocal. So, and it's definitely not a person. You can tell that right away.
And after I reviewed the audio, of course, I went back up there and started looking around, and I found an alder that was broke off, snapped off right about this high, and it was a very live, fresh break. It was a very live tree, and it was a fresh break, and there wasn't really any wind that night, and it looked like it had been purposely broken and pulled down. Okay, this is really cool. In the recording from Sunday, I heard a lot of branch breaking back here. Bailey led me right in here. I'm kind of following her around. As you see, she's sniffing around. And so she wouldn't come back here in the recording, but obviously no one's here now. This, I'm almost positive, was broken Sunday night. Maybe sooner. I mean, the ground's hard to tell if there's any kind of tracks around here. But I heard branch breaking and all this stuff, kind of things being broken around. But something broke that. I wouldn't even think anything of it if it wasn't for the recording. In the recording, there's branches being broken. Recorder's just over there, maybe. Maybe 50, 75 feet that way. And there was just a little game trail there, and going perpendicular to the trail, there was an impression, a 13 by 7 inch impression. Hey, this is an example of what I call an ambiguous track. Something with weight created it. And it's 13. About 6 at the widest. This is probably left foot. That's where I'd consider toes. Got this little kind of rise here and a heel. Who knows? This could have been created by someone with a boot. I don't know. But I've found several like this back here where someone was making noise Sunday night. All it showed was like the heel and the front pad of the foot. No toes were visible. And I actually cast it. It's just an ambiguous impression, but it was right there with that break, and then I recorded Mr. Grumpy Pants. So, and it was impressed in the ground about 1.5 inches. I couldn't even put an impression in the ground. I actually did this, and I think I maybe went in 1/8. So whatever it was heavy, and I believe it broke that branch. So that's Mr. Grumpy Pants.
These grumpy sounds only make up one category of suspicious audio, and perhaps the most eerie category of sounds is yet to come.
There's a category that I call singing that is recorded all across North America, and it's an undulating sound that reminds me of somebody that's maybe humming a tune or, you know, singing a song. It's not any specific tune And it's not the same song. It's not a sound that is a rote, if you will, if that I can use that term correctly, where it's an automatic thing that like a bird does. A bird has a specific call, and once it gets triggered, that call comes out. I don't think that's what we're dealing with in the singing category. There's enough difference between the characters that it fits a category, but it's not specific.
Do you have any theories as to why they might make that sound?
Well, no, but maybe for the same reasons that we sing. You know, it's soothing. It helps them in some fashion. I don't think, I could be wrong, that it's a communication from one to another. I think it's just something that one or two of them will do.
Fairly similar to this collection of singing vocals is a clip that Chris recorded at X1, titled Opera Singer.
Okay, so Opera Singer was August of 2018, and I want to say it was a little bit after 7 p.m., so it was still kind of light out. That was down in X1B once more, and it's just a very high-pitched howl that ends with a high-pitched whoop. And what's interesting about it is it's definitely our target subjects visually and spectrogram. And of course, with the whoop, and I've talked about this before, when they do howls, there's a lot of times they're not just doing a howl. There's a lot of times they do a whoop after the howl, or there's a whoop before the howl, or there's a knock. There's always something else, whether it's them or another one responding to it. But in Opera Singer, there's a high-pitched, almost a long howl. It's not quite that long. And then whoop. And what was cool about it is 2 months before that, in May, me and Rebecca had been in here in the evening, and we had just come out, and as we got up to the car, we were unloading all our stuff, and by the time we got to the car, it was almost dark, because at that time we would come in the evenings to set up the recorder and stuff, and that's because we knew that stuff was more likely to happen in the evening anyways, and we might elicit a response, just our presence being here. And we were unloading, and all of a sudden the coyotes just start going nuts. And we're kind of laughing, oh cool, the coyotes. And then we got in the car and we drove away. Well, if we'd hung out for like 2 more minutes, my audio recorder down here picked up some howls that weren't coyotes. And one of them is the one and only real, I consider, long howl. It's only 12 seconds long, but it is classic. Ah, and at the end of it, there's a powerful whoop. And so that was after the coyotes, so that was cool. I was really excited about that. But what's interesting about it, it was a deeper, mature animal that did this. Opera Singer was a younger animal, I'm guessing, but they were similar except for the tone and pitch of the call. So it was like almost, I felt like when I got Opera Singer, in August, I was like, I bet you that sucker's trying to copy Dad. You know, that was my impression. I don't know for a fact, but it's funny how you have this long howl with a whoop at the end of it, and then in May, and it's obviously an adult animal, and then you have this high-pitched Opera Singer howl and a high-pitched whoop at the end of it in August in the same exact area. So makes the wheel spin.
Perhaps the most popular Sasquatch vocalization is what is called the long howl. The most well-known long howl is an audio clip called the Ohio Howl, recorded by Matt Moneymaker in 1994 in Columbiana County, Ohio. Although long howls have been discussed within this series, there are no unifying theories as to what a long howl could mean.
I think it's a location. Now there are roars, so not to be confused with a roar, but I think the long, drawn out 10 to 12 second howl, Ohio howl is usually the term that people use to help you identify the type of call that is. But I believe it's just a, hey, where are you? I'm over here. I was in Tillamook in 2006 when I heard 3 long distance calls come from one ridge, and that were immediately answered by 3 long distance calls. And there was maybe 2.5 miles separating the two, but they were identical, obviously not the same individual, but so there was communication. Where are you? I'm over here. I mean, that's my speculation.
Whether howls are meant to communicate location or the presence of a male is unknown without further information. But there is a possibility of a more territorial vocal.
Sometimes they will what I can literally describe as a roar.
These roars have been recorded in both the Nest area and X1. One of the most interesting aspects of Sasquatch vocalizations that would most likely rule out a human origin is the concept of what David and Chris call a high-low.
Let's go back to my experience when I was 11 years old. There is this description, and you can see how people struggle with it to describe it. And sometimes the best they can come up with is that it had a high component and a low component. Other times they'll say there was a high-pitched scream and a low-end sound. And then some people describe it like Christopher O'Brien. I don't know if you're familiar with this author. He wrote a book called Stalking the Herd. Anyway, he was on a show regarding Bigfoot, and I thought, well, that's interesting. But he had a personal experience on Mount Shasta, and he had an encounter with one. I don't know if he actually saw it. I don't think he did, but he definitely heard it. And he said that there was a a high component and a low component, but the high component sounded like an elephant trumpeting, and the low component sounded like a lion roaring. And you could have knocked me over with a feather when he said that, because that was my exact description to my dad when I was 11.
The wide array of sounds attributed to Sasquatch goes far beyond the ones presented here. Yet even with this limited data set, the age-old question arises. Why do Sasquatch make sounds in the first place?
Well, I believe it is for communication reasons, the same reasons that all animals make some sound or another, is to send out a signal of their disposition. Where are they? What's going on with you? What's going on with me? So it's no doubt that they are utilizing a little bit higher degree of communication skills than just a rote. They're not just bird calls or a call that's triggered by something that they can't help themselves. They're going to make that vocalize. I think there's thought behind it when they choose to vocalize. The wood knocks seem to be a stealthy way of communication. And when I say wood knocks, that's air quotes, because I don't believe that they only use wood on wood. There's too many circumstances where a knock has been solicited and got an immediate return. Well, they're not standing around with a stick ready to hit a tree. They got to be doing some other thing. And so I believe that they have organic methods of creating a popping sound. And I mean, I can do a...
I personally think the knocking is a way of communication when they're close to humans. I think we miss a lot of stuff when we're in the woods. I know I do. And we've talked about it before. Is like a lot of times when we're out and I think I hear something, I go back and look at my recorder in spectrograph and there'll be nothing there. But then there's the times where I go back and look at the audio and, oh man, we didn't hear that. I mean, we had an instance not long ago. Todd, my son, Shane, and Rebecca, we were in the nest area, and we thought we'd heard a couple things on the outskirts, but you never know. And I checked my audio, and we actually had some whoops above us. We were down in the nest area, and up on the ridge, there's some whoops occurring as we were coming up. And when we got to the top of the ridge, and we were almost to where we had the trucks parked, I thought I heard a knock, but I couldn't tell because we're moving. You got the brush moving. Well, Todd had his recorder by our trucks. And I did hear a knock because one of them power knocked by the trucks as we were coming up the hill. It was announcing, okay, the humans are coming back up to the hill. I think that happens a lot.
Some of the most famous pieces of Sasquatch audio are referred to as the Sierra Sounds. Recorded by Ron Moorhead and Al Berry in 1974 during a trip to an isolated camp spot in the Sierra Nevada mountains in California, their dramatic experience was caught on battery-operated tape recorders. The strange vocalizations have stumped many skeptics. Most interesting is the fact that the audio files have been analyzed by many different scientists and experts. The most notable and often the most quoted conclusion comes from Scott Nelson, a retired cryptolinguist for naval intelligence, saying, "We have verified that these creatures use language by the human definition of it." Over the years, many people have compared what they have heard in the woods to the Sierra sounds, including the Olympic Project's own Rebecca Slick. However, despite the commonality in the sounds heard across the country, the idea of Sasquatch speaking in a full language is still debated.
I'm warming up. There seems to be I may be using this term wrong, but proto-language, the early stages of language. I've noticed and have gathered and recorded short bursts of morphemes in like a bimorpheme, which is a two-phrase morpheme, or a trimorpheme, three distinct sounds that could be the precursor to language. Obviously, it's a communication of some sort. And again, it's something that's recorded all across North America.
I hate this question. Everything has a language. Killer whale pods have distinctive languages from pod to pod. Whales have language, obviously. Chimpanzees have their own language. Gorillas have their own language. Yes, Sasquatch has a language in that respect, as far as I'm concerned. As far as having a language that you could put into writing like ours, a complex language like ours, no, I don't believe they have a language like that. I think they have a form of communication, which is a language. And that's all I got to say about that.
Language or no language, the audio that Chris recorded in X1 was not the only possible evidence to come from the area. During the 4 years that Chris researched there, he brought in several different people to assist him in his research endeavors. One such person was Gerald Mills, who was involved with collecting the most interesting piece of possible evidence to come from X1.
I'm Gerald Mills. I am retired. I was originally a machinist, so that goes along with a lot of what I do because I know how to measure things. I grew up in the 60s during the Patterson film and everything. I actually got to see Roger Patterson in the Columbia Theater here in Longview when he was going around with his show. That was really neat. But when I was in junior high, I used to go through the library and find every book I could find on cryptids. I always thought that they were out there. It came about, Mitch Townsend was doing a special interest class at Lower Columbia College on Sasquatch. My wife saw that and she says, "Oh, why don't you and Aaron, my son, go and see the class?" You know, so we went to the class. You know, it was interesting. I don't think I really learned that much new. He did present well, and he went over most of the stuff that I already knew because, like I said, I was reading about Sasquatch back in the 60s. And so I kind of kept up on it. When we finally got the internet, I was looking at BFRO reports and everything, just out of interest. But he mentioned an experience that he had up north of the mountain, and he was hiking through that area and he found some bones and he brought them to class. And so we all got to look at them, and there was some interesting marks on the bones. And I just thought, well, that's kind of interesting the way he found them. There was a couple logs he sat down on, and they were down in between the log, in kind of a pile down between the log, and neatly disarticulated. And I think he said there was like several deer involved from what he could tell. That was kind of how it got brought to my attention about the bones. Well, later on, my son and I, we like to go up, run around up there, like to explore, drive the roads, camp the area, enjoy the forest, hike around. And that's what we were doing. We went clear to the end of a logging road up near the Boundary Trail, which crosses the Dark Divide. We went up over the ridge and down the other side, and we could hear something tearing a stump apart in the area. So I picked up a couple of sticks and whacked them together, just to see what would happen. And it got really quiet, and then all of a sudden, whatever was down there just took off. I think it was a bear. Just took off running. He was probably a couple hundred yards away from us, but we could hear him crashing brush. And so we went down to see if we could find the stump that he was tearing apart. And we wandered around down there, and I walked up part of an old skidder road and back in behind some huckleberries next to a stump, which there was kind of a little bank. And I came around and I found this pile of bones laying behind the huckleberries. I looked at that and I thought, man, it looks like something could have just sat right here and munched on these bones. And I looked at them, I picked them up, and they were in a nice stack. Like something was eating ribs or something, and just set them all down there. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. And I looked at them and I found the big teeth marks in the bones. So I thought, So I collected those, and on our way out, we found a set of tracks. We actually backtracked the tracks about 100 yards. They were like 17-inch tracks. And what had happened is it looked like something had been eating huckleberries down the creek. Something had spooked it, and it came up out of the creek and crossed the old road that we came down on. There was a layer of hemlock cones, and we found 3 tracks across the road in these hemlock cones that actually squashed the cones down to the road, and just perfect outline of the tracks. I took some pictures. I actually took a cast. That one didn't turn out very good because when you pour the casting on the cones, they just kind of flow away like this. And that's where the track impression was in those cones. The second set I found when we were elk hunting, and that was in the next year, 2015. In September, we were elk hunting, and that was about 10 miles away from where we found the first set. But this is out of the first bunch of bones that we found. And this is what I look for when I'm looking at the bones, is these big, wide gouges out of the bones. And like this is a bite through, so it definitely shows the width of the impression. And then down here are some smaller impressions that definitely look like they had mamelon impressions on them. And that was out of the first set of bones. This is from the second set of bones. We've got these large impressions here, and down here, this we figure was probably a mink that made these canine impressions right there and broke a chunk out.
What's so unusual about these impressions?
They are larger than carnivore teeth, especially this one here. You can really see this one here is probably twice as wide as most carnivore teeth. And carnivores can't bite in like that because their canines get in the way. And the other thing is these are neatly disarticulated, which means they were taken off of the vertebrae. I actually lost an elk one year up when we were elk hunting, and my hunting partner found it about a week later. So I set up a camera on it, and two bears were coming into it. So I got a good idea what bears do to a kill. You know, when they're feeding, they make a mess. You just lay right in the middle of it and just spread everything out and break the bones. And then the coyotes, they come around and grab something and run off with parts of it. But to find the bones, in both cases, the bones that we found for our research, they have the teeth marks in them. They were in piles, or they were on top of things, you know, like a bunch of bear grass. They were laying on top of that. So it's just kind of odd that these bones are either stacked in a pile, nicely disarticulated, not totally destroyed, not spread all over the place. They're just stacked together. So that's one thing that I saw.
As a result of his findings, Gerald went on to write a report that was presented at the 2015 Sasquatch Summit, where Gerald would meet Chris Spencer. Shortly after their meeting, Chris invited Gerald to X1 to aid in researching the area. Gerald's efforts in X1 would lead to one of the most interesting pieces of evidence to come from the area.
Okay. Gerald's got this neat little camera that takes pictures and video with sound. Costs $19.99, and it'll record for about an hour and a half. And it's small. It's perfect, we're thinking, as a drop camera that you drop on your back trail. You pick up on your way out and just see if anything comes in. Get a couple of these, place them around the area you're investigating. You never know, and it's so small it's easy to hide.
He took me in there, and we just kind of scouted around, you know, because he was setting up his recorders then. And a little later on, I started putting out trail cams and put my plot watcher up in there, which is a time-lapse camera. We scouted the whole area, even up on the ridge up above. Of course, I was looking for bones. You know, and Chris knew where some were, so he took me to these different places where he had found dead elk. We didn't really find anything definitive in there. We did find some that we were pretty sure were cougar had fed on them because they were still whole. Found other ones where they were kind of in stacks. I think we found 3 or 4 of them where the bones were kind of all together in stacks, but we didn't find any identifying teeth marks or anything in them. Of course, we found skulls on trees and on stumps, and just, that was weird. But I think a lot of people may walk through that area too, so you can't be sure who or what is doing that. See, I think we'd probably been going through there about a year or so, and I'd set up my camera probably, I think it was in the winter. I set the camera up, and it was looking down through a sort of an open area where they thinned a path through the trees. You could see the stumps, and it could see about 70 yards. It was really funny with the elk. I put a piece of camel cloth, a hole cut in it for the lens because there's no flash. Put a piece of camel cloth and thumbtacked it to the tree, you know, to hide the camera. The elk would walk up to it and pull that camel cloth off. That was really funny. I thought, you know, I can't hide this camera from anything out here in the woods. They know it's there. But I was persistent. I kept putting it back. Anyway, in March of 2016, I was reviewing the images that I got off of the camera. Well, I saw something as far as the camera could see about 70 yards out in front of the camera. And that caught my eye, so I stopped it and looked at it, and I went frame by frame. I could see where 2 individuals They were dark. That's all I know. 2 individuals showed up down as far as the camera could see, and it was right at first light. The camera comes on automatically at first light. So at that time, it was about 6 o'clock in the morning. 2 separate individuals, like I say, they were dark, and they showed up, and one of them was kind of moving around a little bit off to the right, and I got 17 frames. They started down below the camera, and one of them came up, and it came behind a tree and was kind of doing this behind the tree. I could see it, you know, got a frame of them looking around the tree. Came up through the trees, and one of them was a big one, another one was smaller. But it got off to the left of the camera, and it was standing upright, right between the trees. And it looked like to me it was maybe holding something, but I couldn't really tell, you know, and one of the other ones, it looked like it was holding something. I don't know. Anyway, it was standing upright there, and then this little one, smaller one, I saw it pop its head out from behind the tree in that same area. I got a picture of it, like it was looking right towards the camera. And the bigger one squatted down, and then they were gone. That was 40 yards away from the camera, which I said was covered with camel cloth. So it looked like to me that they spotted the camera. That's 40 yards away. I don't know how, but that's what it looked like. And the thing is, we went down and reenacted it, and I left the camera running. I was down there. I had a blue shirt, a light blue shirt on. Chris, you know, I think he had something white on and everything. But anyway, you could tell all these colors. The thing's really pixelated if you try to zoom in on it because it's only like a 2 megapixel camera. And the funny thing is, the second frame has a really funny pose that it did on its legs, and it went down on one arm and stuck one arm up in the air. It was just weird. And I did that. And so I got pictures of us in there doing all. You could tell we were people. You could tell our colored shirts and everything else when we were down there reenacting it. I think it was a week later, I actually got a mushroom picker that came through the area. You could tell he was carrying a bucket. You could tell he had color on his clothes. You could tell it was a person. So I don't know what we got, but it was interesting.
While many skeptics would be quick to point out the low quality of the images, I think it is important to note the distinct differences seen between the recreation shots and the mysterious subjects. Even at this low resolution and distance from the camera, clothes are still clearly visible on Chris and Gerald. Additionally, when these photos are presented alongside the audio that Chris recorded in this area, it creates a compelling body of data. While no one piece is conclusive on their own, when viewed as a whole, many people would be hard-pressed to find a solution that fits every piece of the narrative. Despite the fascinating results of X1, Chris was soon invited into the nest area by Shane Corson and began focusing his research there. In a similar way, the nest area has resulted in tons of different types of evidence, and when viewed all together, creates an incredibly vivid picture of an undiscovered species of apes living in North America. The only piece missing, however, is photographic or video evidence of the creature. In the minds of the skeptics, this makes all the work done by the Olympic Project speculative at best. While crafting this series together, I began to wonder why people look for Sasquatch if the results of their efforts are largely ignored. What significance does the search for Sasquatch have for people like Chris or Rebecca, and what keeps them searching?
Because I'm fascinated by it. I'm always considered myself a learner. I love learning new things, and you know, as a kid growing up, I loved dinosaurs. I mean, I loved the mystery, the Loch Ness monster, the mystery of it. And then on top of it, you have an ape in North America. And I know it's real. I've got recordings that it's real. And I've cast tracks, and I've been out in the woods, and I've had stuff thrown at me. I've been yelled at. You know, I've had a possible sighting. I've had too much stuff happen to just ignore it. Now, if I'd gone out there and recorded nothing that first year, and I probably would have given up on it. I probably wouldn't have left the subject. I would still follow it. But I was lucky enough. I picked a place that there were several Sasquatch in that area, and I was getting stuff, and I was having experiences there. And it just got into me. I wanted to document it. We all want to get visual photographs, but the audio really kept me going, and it's important. I mean, no one else is doing it, and I feel like it's important to me, and I think that maybe someday what I do will help someone else smarter than me do even better than me I am. I don't know. It's just important. I get irritated when people make a joke out of it, but I get it. To me, it's just too important of a subject to just ignore and make a joke out of. There's not very many of them, and who knows what's going to happen in the future with them. But they exist. I mean, once you know they exist, how can you walk away from that?
There's a little part of me that kind of just, it's going to sound weird to say, just be done with it already, just, you know, have one discovered. It's not that I want to see one dead so that it can be taken seriously, but there's a little part of you that just kind of wants it to be real already, and not just something that you're trying to prove. I've never thought that I will be the one to get the footage, or I will be the one to get I still carry cameras, and I'm diligent, because if something does happen, I feel a weight that I should be responsible enough to try to capture it, and hopefully have the presence of mind in that moment to do it. But yeah, there is a little bit of a frustration that, and just wanting it to be discovered. I also know, though, that a lot of the mystery would be gone. There would still be a lot to figure out about them, even if they are proven to exist, but it would be nice to, I've heard a lot of people that say that they don't think it'll be discovered in their lifetime, and that makes them sad. And I don't want to, I mean, even though I believe they're real, I kind of don't want to be in that boat years down the road, you know what I mean? I kind of, with all the tech and everything at our disposal now, I feel like it's just a matter of time that someone will get something.
This is my passion. This is, you know, I actually feel like this is what I'm meant to do, but I would love to see them proved. And yeah, I hope that what I do helps in that endeavor. I don't have any delusions of grandeur that I'm going to prove anything, but I hope that the data I do collect helps add to that puzzle piece, add to that overall picture that others can use in the future. So yeah, I do hope to prove it. I hope in my own way what I'm good at doing contributes to that all-around discovery by actual science.
Well, with the Olympic project, with the idea of collecting data, there's that aspect. But I do want to research and collect data for myself, honestly, because I do obviously really interested in it and want to understand it. But there is that little bit of that feeling of I can get out there. I do get to be blessed enough. I can go out and spend time out there. And so there is a little bit of a feeling of I need to film everything I can, or I need to try to pay attention to anything I can, or yeah, it's a little of both, a little bit. And I do really want to help somehow, because I know there's a lot of people that don't have the time or the opportunities to do this, and there's a lot of people that in a time period when you were marked as crazy for having seen one, they didn't have any of the opportunities or the technology to document what they saw. And so I kind of don't want to drop the ball anytime I have a chance. Although I should journal more. Chris is really good at the journaling. Not so good at the journaling. I think some people can be interested in it and go after it without having any kind of encounter or anything. I'm a little jealous of some people with that, because I feel like I didn't really have a choice in the matter, just because I like to understand things. I like to understand things in nature, and this was something that I did not understand and that I'd possibly been very close to and had no idea about it other than just some childhood stories that I wrote off as fiction. And there I was in the woods thinking that something was gonna take me. But like I said, I'm a little jealous sometimes of people who can just, you know, they don't have that interest in it. For a lot of people, I don't think you have a choice. It just kind of, it'll either eat at you or you just gotta figure it out. You wanna understand it. It's just one of those unanswered questions. And you can be so close sometimes. You can just, it's like they're right there behind the wall of Huckleberry, you know? It's just frustrating. But it's just not the right time yet.
Call it what you will, but the way my life has played out has led me to where I'm at right now. I made a lot of mistakes in my life, as everyone has, but I don't regret anything, because I wouldn't be the person I am today without all those mistakes. And that's how I look at this subject too. We make a lot of mistakes, but we learn from those mistakes. And a lot of the mistakes I make now, we learn from. And I think that a lot of people miss the fact that science is a series of mistakes. I didn't grow up thinking that I would be doing what I'm doing today, but that's true for all aspects of my life. You know, what I envisioned myself doing when I was 10 years old is nowhere near where I'm at. You know, what I envisioned myself doing when I was 21 years old is like nowhere near that. You know, I'm 51 now, and I keep waiting for that day I'm gonna wake up with wisdom, because in my mind at 21, I was like, oh, by the time I'm 50, I'm gonna have it all figured out, and I'm gonna be good to go. You know what? I'm like, when's that gonna happen? So.
When I first got exposed to it, it was just something, a thing, you know, not necessarily something that I would have studied, but it was that it never went away. And when it never went away, it finally got to the point where I had to go find out what was going on. And I believe I've answered that satisfactorily for myself anyway. Now, it's a wonderment. I feel bad for people that don't have wonderment in their life. You know, wonderment is what keeps most people going.
I'd still go looking even if it was discovered, just because I feel like that would just be the first step. That would be an exciting first step for it to be recognized. Well, plus I don't know if you can go cold turkey off of Bigfooting after you've that's kind of been our lives and our circle of friends' lives for quite a while now. So that would be difficult. They'd have to lock us all out of the woods. I would still go looking for myself and for the fact that that's been the source of so much time with good people and so many memories too. You can't just cut that out. I mean, I'm sure we could just go camping, but it wouldn't be the same. And plus we have all the tech, and then we could still get more footage to go with whatever anybody else has at that point. I am actually excited to see who gets it. Because you're starting to get more thermals out there. You're starting to get more gosh, the LiDAR apps and for tracks, and it's just a matter of time.
It's just like anything else. There are people that are really into known animals, bird watchers, you know, nature photographers. My fiance, Rebecca, she loves nature, and she photographs, and she has an interest in everything, you know, the plants, the animals, the insects, the amphibians. And I do too, to a point. I mean, growing up as a kid, I spent most of my time running around the woods by myself, just discovering whatever I could around the creek, you know, and just overall, I love nature. So I'm gonna be still doing what I'm doing, you know. And what's more incredible than a freaking large ape walking around North America? Yeah, if it's discovered, I will be out in the woods still doing exactly what I'm doing right now. If science accepts it as a real animal, I will still be doing what I'm doing regardless.
What if you never find Bigfoot?
I'm good with that. I mean, I would say I have found Bigfoot. I would say absolutely I have had experiences with Bigfoot. I haven't had that me to you visual, but I know they're there and I've recorded them. So if where I'm at right now, if this is all I ever get, I'm good with that, because it's pretty darn incredible. I feel lucky. I feel really lucky to have found the things I have, to have recorded the things I have. I feel blessed, honestly. I mean, I'm kind of riding on a high right now because of that trackway. I never thought I would find more than 1 or 2 impressions. I call them ambiguous impressions. And I've found a lot of ambiguous impressions in areas that I know these things hang out, but I've never found anything like this. So, yeah, I'm good. I'm good with everything right now.
The level of dedication to Sasquatch research that members of the Olympic Project have never fails to amaze me. Their devotion to the subject is inspiring, but it is their frustrations that make them relatable. The elusivity of Sasquatch has rendered many ardent researchers hopeless in the past. But still, Chris and Rebecca continue on, relentlessly pursuing the truth with all the resources they have at their disposal. Researchers like Gerald bring unique and new methods of looking for evidence to the table, creating a larger data set pointing to the existence of a large ape species in North America. The casual interest in Sasquatch by many does not bring us closer to any true conclusion on the subject, but the hard work conducted by serious researchers does. People who are compelled to go beyond their books and maps and step out into the woods with clear heads and discerning attitudes takes us one step further along the road to discovery.